almost all animators and motion designers start off learning animation by doing the bouncing ball. I wanted to try something newer that still incorporates a lot of those techniques and push it a little further. So I came up with the inchworm, and I'm going to do a beginner version and then an intermediate and pro version of this. Basically, if you just want to know the quick breakdown, what I did was I came up with one path and I used the pick whip to tie all the other paths together. These are just paths parented together so that they move together. You know, there's the gradient fill and then the dashed lines that I added some rough edges to. So we're going to start off by doing the beginner version of this. Whenever you're, and for the advanced and pro version, I used the points follow nulls, and we'll get into that. Whenever you're doing a project in After Effects, you think about where it's going. And, you know, there's all these templates that should help you out if you're doing stuff for social media. So when you're starting off, you always think about where your project's going to go. The majority of my work is 1920 by 1080 or 4K, which would be 3840 by 2160. But to change any of your resolutions for your aspect ratios and all that, that's just composition, new composition. And here's where you can add it on. Plus, there's all these presets. So if you don't really know off the top of your head, they've got social media sizes. And, you know, so I'm going to be doing 1920 by 1080, and I'm going to be working at 24 frames per second. So I'm going to start off with the new composition. I'm just going to click the new composition button here, or you could go to composition, new composition. So I've got my 1920 by 24 frames. You could change your frame rate here if you need to, or you could use your drop down. So this is going to be 2K resolution, full screen. And let's just do 10 seconds. Remind your time code is hours, minutes, seconds, frames. So when you're happy with it, you can change your background color here. I'm just going to stick with black. Okay. So the absolute beginner version of this, you'd want to use the pen tool. And I still have mine set up from the last time. There's no fill. You click the word fill to get rid of it or add a solid or gradients. Same with stroke. You click on the word to choose if you want no stroke, a solid, or gradients. I chose a radial gradient for mine. And you could change the stroke width right here, and you click on the thumbnail to set your colors. That's for my gradient. So again, I'm going to hit cancel, click the word. I chose radial gradient, and I set my width to 106. If you just click, you're going to get a straight line with no Bezier curve handles. We don't want that. Let me delete that. Says the backspace key. And I'm going to get rid of that shape layer just by selecting in my timeline and hitting the backspace key. If you click and drag with the pen tool, that's when you get your Bezier curve handles, like such. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag, and click and drag. And I'm just keeping it fairly straight. Doesn't have to be perfect. But the important thing is I've got 3 Bezier curve handles to work with. And that's what's going to be my animating. Now, to move around in your canvas, you can use the hand tool, which is also the H key. Or if you've got a mouse, you can hold down on your middle mouse wheel and move up and down. I strongly suggest working with the mouse. You could also use the scroll wheel, scrolling up and down to zoom in and out. Speeds up your workflow, so get off the trackpad. All right. So, how to animate this. You're going to want to use your twirl down menus. Go to Contents, Shape, Path. And then this path stopwatch is what you're going to use to animate it. So, if I click the stopwatch, you always start off by figuring out what you want to do and then, changing your timing. So you put the playhead where you want to start, click your stopwatch, and now I'm going to move my playhead a little bit, and you'll notice all of my path points are selected. If I hold down the shift key, and I click on one, this one is deselected. So if I click on it again, now only this one is selected and these two are not. Selected, it's lit up solid blue. Deselected, it's got the hollow blue. So that's how you can tell which one you're working. So I've chosen a point. I had my playhead, click the stopwatch, set my first keyframe. You can go anywhere. I've got my 1 point selected. Now your path is moving. You can animate paths, and you could also animate Bezier curve handles like that. And whenever you change something, it adds a new keyframe. So be careful when you're moving things. And if you want to edit any of your keyframes, you got your forward and next keyframe buttons right here. And that will line you up, because that way you can perfectly change your path without creating a new keyframe. You've got to watch out for that when you're working. So that's the basic intro to animating path points. So I'm going to delete this, and we're going to go back to my main comp. So think about what you want to do and then how you're going to do this. And this whole thing is just the path point being animated. So the way the inchworm moves is the back scoots up, which makes the middle rise. Then the front moves. So you got to be deliberate with your motion. So I'm going to move just the back, raise the middle, and then just the front. So again, I'm just click and drag. I'm starting with a new path just to make it clean. Click and drag and click and drag. So I've got my 3 points. And you're basically going to want this one as close to the middle as you can. Okay, so remember, we're just animating the path. I'm going to click my stopwatch. I'm going to go forward a little bit. All my paths are selected because the keyframe is activated. So I'm going to hold down Shift. And again, so only the end is selected. So I'm going to click and drag that. And I'm holding down Shift just to carry it straight. And I'm going to raise up the middle. You can adjust your curves however you want. I'm going to want near the curve towards the back just for aesthetics. So let's check out our motion. The back is moving forward. That's causing the middle to rise. I'm going to go forward a little bit more. Now I'm going to make the front just like the front. Hold down Shift, drag that out. Bring this down. And now we have, and this blue bar right here, you can click and drag. That sets your render area, so you're not wasting your time rendering the whole timeline. And you can check out your motion better. That's the beginner way of doing it, okay? Quick and simple. We thought about how we wanted it to move, figured out what we needed to animate, which was just the path. So the back point moves forward. We raised the middle. And then we dragged out the front and brought down the middle. That's all it was. Nice, quick, simple. And now we're going to take it to a more advanced level. And you're going to want to try and keep your volume. What I did for mine was I created guides right here. This is the length of it, and that's the middle. So I use that to set my volume. So I would know I was keeping it the same dimensions as it moved. And then I just created a second guide to help me with that. So it's the same. I kept the volume. So we're going to do all the same things. First, you notice I've got butt caps. We don't want that. So we're going to dial into the look of this now. So I'm going to go to, we're still under the shape. There's contents, shape. Let's try stroke. Yep, it's under the stroke. So there's my stroke, which is a gradient stroke. And here I can change my butt caps. You'll notice they're squared off. I don't want that. So if I go to round, now they're round. The miter join, that would be the middle part where, if you want an elbow, you'd want that rounded or squared off. Let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to click off my stroke. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. I've got 3 hard lines. If I go round cap, it rounds the edges. And you'll notice where the corner they meet, that is hard. So the join, I do a round join, now it's going to be round all the way around. So I just wanted to show you what that's going to look like if you don't do that. So it's up to you stylistically, but me, I'm going for round join, round cap. I reset my width, and I chose a gradient from Radial Gradient, and you can click here to set it up. So I'm just going from red to green in my gradient. And once you've got the gradient selected, you'll see this little ball here. And that's where your gradient is moved. So it's right here. And you'll notice as the worm moves, the gradient stays still. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to have the gradient move with my shape. And to do that, that's going to be the start and the end, either or. Let me find out which one it is. We'll go forward, I'll move it, so it's staying in the middle. And this is the end. That's to change the width of it. Mine is roughly about the middle third. So I moved both the start and the end to keep that. Then we go down to the next keyframe. You could always use your previous and next. And you'll notice I created an extra keyframe, which I don't want. So I can just select it and hit backspace. So I'm lined up, and I'm going to adjust my gradient again. Here it is up here. So now, as the worm moves, the gradient moves with it. You want to try and be consistent. It's just these little things that push your motion. So now we can say, okay, we want a stroked path to go with this. So I can, why are there 2? This one was created by accident. It's empty. Okay. Oh, that was when I made the bend up there. You always want to work clean. I'll call this body gradient. Okay. So we've got this. I'm going to duplicate it. Control D. And if you hit the enter key, you can name it. I'll call this stripes. Hit the enter key. All right. Here's where we're going to go from beginner to intermediate. I've got my path right here. And I'm going to go to my path up here. And I want to get rid of all these keyframes. So I'm just going to click on my stopwatch to get rid of them. That's on the stripes layer. Now you'll notice this pick whip here for the path. I can pick whip this path to that path. Now you're going to see that change in a second. So we're going to do, let's do solid stroke for this. So I'm going to go solid, and it's the nice dark color, so that's fine. You choose whatever you want. You'll notice now it's moving exactly with the other one. So we're just going to work on getting our dashes. So I twirl down my stroke, twirl down the stroke, hit the plus for dashes, and now I can start adjusting my dashes. I'm going to find a decent enough number. Okay. And if we adjust the stroke, that's going to change the dash that way. So we'll just try and find a happy medium. You choose whatever you like. I'll go about there. Offset, that's just going to change where it falls on the path. You know what? Let's do butt cap for this, just for the fun of it. Now, if we do this, now we've got our stripes. So that was taking off the round. I'm happy with this. And you'll notice the stripes move along with it. So we're good. That was using the pick whip to parent from the path to this path stopwatch. That parents them together. And this is, like I was saying, we're basically there. So we can start saying, well, let's fine tune our look because we've got our motion already set up. So I'm going to do roughen edges, as I'd said before. I'm going to drag that to my stripes. And already they're looking more organic. And you can adjust the look of this in your effects controls. If you're not seeing them, you could use this double arrow to go between your panels. It's really up to you. If you want a more fuzzy look, just watch it doesn't leave the body. You can adjust your stroke there if it does. The softer your edge sharpness, the more cloudy or mist-like it looks. You can make it with them. So that's pretty fun. Now let's fine-tune this some more. So what I did was I added a noise texture to the body. I used turbulent noise for that. So we can do the same thing. So I'm going to go to my body. I'm going to save my file. And I'm going to put this project file in Google Drive and link it here just so you can see it all. So we're going to do turbulent noise. It's always fastest to just search in the search bar. And whenever you want to apply an effect, you click and drag it onto the layer you want to add it to. And right away you can see we've got this happening. If I change my blending mode, now I'm getting the result I want. So you just pick whatever blending mode you like. I'm going to try overlay. Overlay works, and we just work on our look. So the different drop downs will give you different feel. I'm kind of happy with that one. Contrast will just increase the lights and darks. You can always twirl down transform and change your scale to make it larger or smaller. I'm kind of happy with that. So again, it's just playing around, adjusting your brightness to get the look you want. I'm going to want it to be fairly bright. I want to give it an illusion that light's passing through it. That's called subsurface scattering. When light hits some things in nature, it sort of absorbs into it. It's like with the human ear or a candle or plastic, wax, things like that have subsurface scattering. So that's the light hitting an object and passing through. So we're sort of getting that, and we'll go dial it in some more. Now you'll notice when this moves, the texture is going to stay still. So I can do the same thing. I can move my texture along with it. To do that, that's under my transform, and it would be the offset turbulence. So I click that. Your first button is side to side. The second button's up, down. I want to move it side to side. So I've got my playhead where the beginning is, and then I go to the end. Let's go line it up perfectly. There, okay. And I'll just move it a little bit over. So let's take a look at what we've got. There we go. And by moving that texture in the same direction, it helps create some of that bending effect. So we're looking pretty good. Now we're talking about subsurface scattering. When light hits some things and passes into it a little bit, like we said with the ear, wax, candles. So I'm going to do CC light sweep. I'm going to put that on. If I put it on the body, it'll only apply to the body. So yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to apply it to just the body so it doesn't hit the stripes. Because that's just what I'm doing stylistically. You could always twirl down to close or open to clean up. All right, now let's take a look at our effect. Here it is right here. And I found that by adjusting right here. Okay. CC Light Sweep is usually animating the center stopwatch to create that light sweep across text and various things. You can animate it. A lot of people animate, but you could also just keep it still. Some people put it on characters to create a rim light on them to help separate them from the background. So by adjusting the direction and the position, let's try 90. So now it's going straight across. So we turned it 90 degrees. And if I lower it right there, now it's hitting. You can adjust the width. And you see the width is going down into it to give that subsurface scattering look. So I like that. Let's check the intensity. That's basically how much harsh light you want on it. The edge intensity. Head. Right about there. And your blend mode. You can do add or composite. I kind of like add. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to move this to here. And we're seeing it's not moving with the bend. So let's try doing the adjustment layer at this point. So I'm going to copy this, turn it off. And now I'm going to create an adjustment layer. An adjustment layer affects every layer beneath it. So it saves you time. I just right-clicked and choose New Adjustment Layer. If you right-click in the empty part of your timeline, you can get that pop-up menu. Or you could always go Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, right there. I'm going to paste that effect. That was Command-C, Command-V to paste it. Now let's see what happens when I bend it. Nope, it's not. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to adjust our center. We're going to click the stopwatch. I just hit the U key to show or hide my keyframes. And I'm going to go to my middle path point. And I'm going to adjust that sweep. So let's move this a little bit. There it is. Up. And then we got to move it back. So I'm going to want my first keyframe. So if I go U to show that layer, Command-C to copy, Command-V to paste, now the light is moving with it. So it's just trying to keep things consistent as you work. Just little tips and tricks. So we did a blending mode for the color. I'm going to do a blending mode for my stripes layer just to help it anchor onto it a little bit better. So these are your modes. I can tell them in modes because I see the word mode there. This is where you can get your track mats and things like that. Right here is a button that says toggle switches and modes. So you may see this. These are your switches. This is where you can enable 3D layers, and you could always parent in both of them, but this is also where you can continuously rasterize if you bring in Illustrator graphics. And you could also apply motion blur here. So these are switches. The little checkboxes are switches. Click here. Now we're in modes. Modes is where you can adjust the blending mode of a layer. So I got my layer right here for my stripes. And you'll see the second I do that, it's going to change the look and feel of it. So you go through and find the one you want. It's really up to you as the artist. Hard light's not half bad. Let's try multiply. Multiply's all right. Darker color. Let's do color burn. Nah, we'll stick with color burn. Just for fun of it. And at this point, we adjusted the blending mode. We could also hit T for opacity. Think about transparency. And I could adjust the transparency at this point to change the look and feel. So it's coming along very nicely. And that's basically how I created the animation you see. Now I'm going to teach you the points follow nulls version of this. So I'm going to hit save. And what I'm going to do is create a new composition. And I'll call this and this one, composition 1, I'm going to rename just so it's easier because I'm going to share my file. I'm going to call this original comp 2, what we did here. I'm going to call this tutorial. And this way you'll have access to all the files. Okay, so here we got points follow nulls. So I'm going to click and drag, click and drag, and click and drag. Just like we started off. And I'm going to make these round caps and round join. So I'm twirling down to my path. Sorry, the stroke right there. And I'm going to change to a round cap and a round join. Boom. Now, to get the null effect that I did, you have to have your path selected. And by doing so, I don't mean just selecting the layer because that's unselected. And then when you select it, you see it's lit up. You have to click here on the word path. The word path must be selected. You go to Window up at the top, create nulls from paths. You got 3 options. Points follow nulls, which is what I did. You move the null, the point moves with it. Nulls follow points. That's the opposite. You move the point and the null moves with it. Trace path is for things like, say you design an atom, you've got your loop going around it. You can have something follow that point. So your path, I'll show you that. All right, so I'm doing points follow nulls, close the window. I name my nulls to make it easier. You can see it's selected right here. So I'm gonna hit enter. I'll call this head. This one's probably the middle. Yep, hit enter, mid, and this one's the tail. So hit enter, tail, boom, hit enter again. Okay, so if I move my mid, hit P for position, now the path is moving. So you can animate your nulls and still do the same thing of, parenting the paths together, like I showed you with the pick whip. And you go saying, well, why would I want to do this method? Well, pretend someone goes, you know what, let's move this. So I'm going to animate the mid and the tail, P for position, and the head, P for position. Okay, so we've got our playhead, move it a little bit, and we're going to bring the mid up and the tail over. And then we're going to go forward, and again, we're going to bring the mid down, over a little bit, and we're going to bring the head this time. I'm going to click here for where I want it to go. So I'm going to work backwards because I forgot to do point. So from here, I'm clicking that. These two are exactly the same. I made no change over time. So now I can move my head forward. Sometimes you got to work backwards. I forgot to set a keyframe so it animates forward from here to there. So we've got that. That's working good. And then we could say, okay, let's do our duplicate of this. So if I duplicate this, see, is that P for position? Yeah, so I'm going to add a keyframe here because I need some data for this to work. So I'm going to call this, all your data is in the keyframe. So I'll call this body solid. When I duplicate it, I'm going to hit Command D, and these will still be anchored. Parented. I'm going to name this. I'll call this stripes. And I'm going to just make this bright green, shrink it down, and I'll just make it dashes. So I'm not going to worry about making it look pretty because it's just to show you how the effect works. Again, that's in your stroke, dashes. So now when I move it, that's because, you know what? We might not even have to parent this because this is still using the same nulls. But just be on the safe side, just to show you one more time, I'm going to get the pick whip on the path, drag it there, and now it is parented. Oh, that undid it. Okay, so we're going to undo that because we want to follow the nulls. Okay, so that's the difference there. It's all about troubleshooting as you go along. Okay, so you're saying, well, why would we want to parent something? Well, we'll pretend this is someone riding the yam, okay? We'll just pretend it's a character from a movie. I'll call this character. It's always faster to teach the topics. That's why I use shapes, so you can learn the techniques rather than having me try and find the artwork and waste your time. Just focus on learning. I'm going to parent the character to the middle null because that's where it's sitting. And now it moves with that middle null. You might have to fine tune it a little bit, but it's looking pretty good. Or it might be, yeah, see a little bit of fine tuning and you're good. So that's one of the benefits. Or if you want to add a head. So I'm going to go here and sure, here we go. We'll call this the head. Hitting enter to name it. There we go. So if I parent this now to my front null, it's going to move along with it. That's why nulls are handy. You can also use nulls to rotate things. And to do that, you would probably need to rig your nulls together. So I'll show you that next. We're diving deeper into things than I wanted to this morning, but, I'm already on a roll. So for this instance, I'm going to do an elbow bending with the hand. I'm going to do straight lines like that because there's bone, there's rigidity. So it's the opposite of the worm. The worm has no bones. That's why it's got that noodle-like look. The arm has bones going through it, so I want to keep that rigidity. So I got my 3 points. And again, if you want to go through your contents, your shape, the path, click the word path, go window, create nulls from paths. We're going to want to points follow the paths. And I'm going to close this. You can see it's selected right there. So I'm going to call this the wrist, hit enter. This should be the elbow. And this should be the shoulder. Okay. So I'm going to use my selection. Now if I move my, whoopsie-daisy. See, now it's working. So the wrist, P for position. It's bending at the elbow. Beautiful. Now we're going to add a hand. And I'm going to link these together as a character rig. Because if I don't link them, the hand will not rotate. There needs to be a link going through it. So I'm going to parent you could use your pick whip or your drop down. I'm going to parent the elbow to the shoulder and the wrist to the elbow. So the elbow is parented to the shoulder. The wrist is parented to the elbow. We're going to test this out. If I move this, the rig still works. Now, here's where we kick it up a notch because we already created our character rig. I'm just going to draw a hand. We'll pretend this is the hand. So we'll name it hand and we'll position it. We'll say right about there. Perfect. I'm going to parent the hand to the wrist. So I'm going to use my pick whip, drag it to the wrist. So now when I move my wrist null, sync P to get that, it's moving. Beautiful. And my shoulder, if I hit R for rotate, the whole arm is moving because it's parented to that shoulder. I did a character rig. Here's where it gets more interesting. The wrist, you saw me change the position to move the hand. Now when I rotate the wrist, because I created that character rig out of my nulls, now I can rotate the hand and still keep it attached. So you can wave and move the arm at the same time. So this is why the points follow nulls is so effective. This one, I'm going to call it arm rig. Right, that should be good. And lastly, I'm going to just show you the orbit, like following a path. Okay. So lastly, we got this. Now, I started off wrong to show you something. There's no path in this, so the effect will not work. So I'm going to delete that. When you run into that, make sure Bezier path is checked right here. If I click on Bezier path, it's going to change my shape, get off it, go back, just so in case I need to refresh it. So now I've got this Bezier path is now selected. So now when I go down, now there's the path. You've got to have the Bezier path checked on before you make your shape layer to activate that path. It's an After Effects thing, you know, Adobe is not very good. So I've got my path selected, window, create nulls from paths, trace path. I'm going to click off. And now what you're going to see is this is going to follow whatever path you drew. So if you wanted, you could, let's just do a circle. And for this, I'm going to deselect, back to the beginning. And I'm going to give it no stroke and a fill, solid. I'm going to put this right there. So I'm going to call this Atom. I'm going to parent, using the pick whip, my atom to the trace path. And now that's following the path. So you just got to be careful and watch how it moves. Sometimes that might be your anchor point. So my anchor point for my shape is right there. Sometimes if you want to, you can double click the pan behind tool because that's what you use to change your anchor point. So I drew a new shape. I had to deselect and then select in order to see my anchor point. It's another Adobe glitch. So the pan behind tool, I can just use that to move my anchor point. Holding down Control will snap it to a point or a corner or a center. So that's holding down Control. And if you quickly just want to get the anchor point to the center of a layer, you double click on the, oops, let me hit undo. You hold down Command or Control and double click on the pan behind, and then it'll snap it to the center. So the anchor point influences the motion, as I've discussed before. What that means is, I'll just do a star. And let's see, where's my anchor? So I clicked off, okay. If I hit R for rotate, it's in the center. It's going to spin around like a propeller blade. If I move it to a corner or edge, holding down Command or Control, now it's going to swing back and forth like a pendulum. So that's just showing you how the anchor influences motion. It also influences the scaling, where it's scaling in and out of. So set your anchor point before you do your motion. Work on your motion before you fine-tune your look and feel, and then try and keep it consistent. You know, like we moved the gradient so the gradient moves with the character. We moved the CC light sweep to move with this. We moved the texture to keep moving in the direction of your work. It's just being consistent, trying to keep your volume, trying to pay attention to little details, adding visual interest when and where you can. Like we said, we did the gradient, we added some noise, we added the light effect, we added the stripes. It's far more interesting than just having a line moving around. So hope you found this helpful and have a great weekend.